030, 17-162-020, 17-176-10, 010, 17-236-010, and Table 1712-1 of Section 1712-010 of Title 17. Zoning of the Yountville Municipal Code, to amend the Yountville zoning map to establish the Commons zoning district, amend the land use, and 3, amend the land use element of the Yountville general plan. 4, to approve and adopt the tentative subdivision map for the Yountville Commons project located on APN 036, 070, 026, and 036, 070, 025, and approve and adopt the addendum to the 2019 final environmental impact report for the Envision Yountville General Plan update for the project.
Could you repeat that, please?
All right. Staff.
Thank you, Chair Miller and members of the ZDRB. So, little background, I won't read through this entire slide, but as you can see, and I think we all know, we've been through a robust public engagement process throughout this planning and visioning phase, starting, almost, frankly, 2 years ago. Importantly, at the conclusion of the meeting on March 4th, 2025, the Town Council adopted Resolution 25-4344, directing the town manager to proceed with preparing further designs, plans, and importantly, entitlements and studies based on the conceptual site plan for potential development of the Yountville Commons site. So that word entitlements, why are we here? We're here for the ZDRB to consider making a recommendation to the Town Council to approve general plan amendments, zoning code and zoning map amendments, tentative subdivision map, and CEQA compliance for the entitlements for the Yountville Commons project. With that, I'm going to turn it over to lead designer Brendan Kelly to go over some details of various project components.
Good evening, commissioners.
Good evening.
It's nice to be here. It's an exciting milestone for the project. I'm here to tell you that the design team has obviously been working for many, many months with the entitlement team, which has been on a twin track trying to match us, and we're trying to match them as they look through the general plan and some of the CEQA sort of standards around this. The plan in front of you has not changed since the last time you saw this. And the entitlement package that's also in front of you tonight reflects the design that's here on the model, on the plan, and many, many months of public meetings and a lot of the outreach that all of you have been a part of. We developed this train metaphor and this map as part of the fall outreach efforts, and many people found it helpful. The visioning of this project started long before our involvement. The town council, the site, of course, adjacent to town hall. The train left the station, as Aaron said, many, many months ago. We are now at the top of the train track here at CEQA Station, and that's really what this process is. We have gone through RFQ crossing, and we've issued the RFP just yesterday. So there are a lot of exciting things happening simultaneously with the project. Yountville Commons at a glance are things that you know. It transforms the site. It protects a lot of trees. It reuses a lot of the buildings. It builds over 60,000 square feet. And I'm not going to read this whole page to you, but it's a reminder, and my point of being up here tonight is that even though you're looking at the full entitlements tonight, I really wanted to just spend a minute talking to you about the project. For example, it's a maximum of 150 units. We're planning on 120 or fewer, for example. Even though there are many, many things on CEQA levels, I want to make sure that you know that there's nothing about the project that we've defined and talked about for the last several months is changing. it's nerve-wracking for the teams and for the public and perhaps for you, although you don't seem very nerve-wracked. Talking about a project in its full impact sounds like it's about to start construction tomorrow. Nothing that's happening tonight is about you committing dollars, of course. When we talk about the parking or the traffic or the height of the buildings or all these other things, this is a phased project. And the town has great control over the decisions by the town council about how fast they build things. So at no point will all of a sudden, one day, it's today, and then, at the end of the project, there's 150 apartments. That's not foreseen in any kind of reality. So again, a reminder that we are, I got a lesson up here on this. We're up here and we're heading to Funding Junction in February. A lot of the documents that we've been preparing are getting the costs to you, the town council. So a lot of the questions that many people have, of course, can be answered, and the town can decide how much and how aggressive and that they want to be over the next, over 2026, 2027, and beyond. So we're adding color. We are at a point where we're about to join with the design build entity, where a lot of the rest of the design will happen. There are a lot of finishes. For example, the colors on the building are not decided. Some of the finishes in stone we've heard about, some of the historic things, and some of them quite maybe more contemporary. All of them are allowed under the documents that you're reviewing and talking about tonight. There's a lot of collateral images that we've talked about that are also available for the range of colors and the building types that we've chose. The ochre colors and the different color buildings and the ivy that's growing on them, these are all still quite possible within the entitlements that you're reviewing tonight. Even the center building with its kind of very active ground floor and the brise soleil that we have at the center of the building is also defined clearly in this building, or clearly in the entitlements that you're reviewing. We included this because of the front porch of the village center building, which is on the second and third floor. It hasn't really been sort of described, and we're trying to fill in some of these things. And and mostly tonight, I'm trying to make sure that you're aware that we've been able to kind of get a lot of this information over as part of the entitlements, and that's what they're also reviewing, whether it's outdoor exit spaces or roof gardens or public spaces. Tonight is about creating value. This project, of course, creates value for the town by entitling it. Of course, is a big milestone. Again, it's as Gary Bell said last Tuesday, you're describing the maximum allowable things. The town gets to decide incrementally about how much they're going to finance. This is part of a planning legacy, including and especially Lawrence Halprin, who was so involved in the general plan, before I was born, honestly. It's a practical solution to the workforce housing crisis that's throughout California and certainly in Yountville. And mostly we've tried to respond to the community and the design, but to be able to make valuable places, you're making active places become valuable, valuable places become interesting. We get told all the time by neighbors and different folks, and it's like, hey, this looks really great. It's like, well, it has to be valuable first, and a big part of that process is entitling it, of course, tonight. A lot of the value is these buildings that we've tried to pretend are not alike, but of course they have to be alike for the consistency and the price prediction. They have units. They have units that can go from studios to one bedrooms to junior twos. This is also in your package. The parcels look weird. The parcels were designed at the very last part of this project because this is not a subdivision that gets sold in blocks to customers or to developers. This is a town-owned asset, and we actually drew lines around the finished design so they could be financed and phased, and infrastructure could be figured out around them. It looks like a Picasso painting, but it's a reason why it doesn't look like a typical subdivision, because, of course, it's not. The phasing, of course, the horizontal it happens first. And when I talk about horizontal improvements, it's about grading and utilities, electrical, water, sewer, waste, storm drain. That's the yellow zone, including, of course, the demolition of the 1956 building next door. During phase 2, the intent is for the dog park and all the edges along the public roads on Fennell and Yount Street to be essentially completed or left alone in a dormant state. So the construction is back in the back corner. It's something that the community wanted to see, not wanting a big construction project on the public ways for the life of the project. And of course, phase 3, after the 85 units approximately are finished, it would be finished out on Yount Street. That's the last part. I want to end on parking, because we've spent some time in the last couple of meetings talking about parking. I've had conversations with a number of you about parking. We've been thoughtful about parking. It is a balance. This is a reinvention of the center of town. I did this reverse figure ground diagram mostly to illustrate that within a quarter mile of this site, 50% of all the land, public and private, is dedicated to the automobile. And when you think of Yountville, especially the heart of it, you don't think of it as a place experienced by cars. Of course, it's an enjoyable place to drive around. But this project, specifically this project, is about balancing cars, pedestrian activity, and certainly new residential programs. And we've done our best, and I think we have a very good solution. Most importantly, it will be phased so the town can very, very easily see the impacts long before the final parking design is implemented. And I think that's under 5 minutes, and I win a prize from Brad.
Thank you, Brendan. So back to the entitlements and what we're doing this evening. So the first of those are the general plan amendments. So amending the general plan land use element to include the new commons land use designation and to amend policies related to height restrictions, in particular land use policy 2.5 and 2.6, and an amendment to the general plan land use map figure LU-3 to change the project site from public facilities and parks and playfields to commons. And so, I wish this were bigger. And so on the left, you can see the general plan land use map as it exists today. You see on the left, it is currently designated public facilities and parks and playfields. The revised map is on the right. You can see the new commons land use designation in purple and the corresponding commons district on the map there. The second entitlements to consider are the zoning code and zoning map amendments. So this, like the general plan, includes the creation of a new common zoning district, which is the new district of 1746, the commons, that creates the rules and regulations for the project site. And there are zoning text additions and amendments to account for the new common zoning district. And like the general plan land use map, there's an amendment to the zoning map to include the new common zoning designation. And you can see that actually a little bit better on this one. You can see the new commons zoning district and the corresponding district on the map there. And so the third entitlement that the ZDRB is considering this evening is the tentative subdivision map. So that there are 2 existing parcels now, and those 2 parcels will be subdivided into 18 individual parcels. Parcel 1, which Brendan showed earlier, will be just over 130,000 square feet and largely consists of the open space and parking areas. The remaining 17 parcels will accommodate project-related buildings and will range in size from just over 4,100 square feet to just over 41,000 square feet. And you can see those lot areas there on the right. And so Brendan showed this, and I thought he did a good job describing why the parcels look the way they do, infrastructure, financing, and phasing. So I included the map on the right is the actual snip of the tentative subdivision map, and then the smaller version on the left is just with the red highlights so you could actually see them a little bit better. The final entitlement to consider is CEQA compliance. So pursuant to CEQA guidelines 15164, an addendum to the Yountville General Plan environmental impact report that was originally certified on May 7th, 2019 was prepared for the project. And with that, I would like to introduce Amber Sharp from PlaceWorks, the consulting firm that assisted us with the CEQA documentation, to take over.
Thank you. Good evening. As Aaron mentioned, I'm Amber Sharp, and I'm a project manager at PlaceWorks, and I assisted the town with the preparation of the addendum to the general plan EIR. So this evening, I will discuss the purpose of CEQA, or the California Environmental Quality Act. I'll also provide some background regarding the existing general plan EIR. I'll provide an overview of the Yountville Commons EIR addendum, of the general plan EIR development assumptions, and the Yountville Commons project, and also I'll talk about environmental topics covered in the addendum. Let's see. So EIRs, the purpose of CEQA is to inform government decision makers and the public about the potential environmental impacts of a proposed project and to avoid or mitigate those impacts. Environmental impact reports and other environmental documents are strictly disclosure documents that describe a project's environmental impacts and identify needed mitigation measures. One note is that CEQA documents do not include recommendations about the approval or denial of a project. So as Aaron mentioned, the town prepared an EIR for the existing general plan. The EIR was certified and the general plan was adopted in 2019, as Aaron mentioned. The general plan is considered a program level EIR. So program level environmental review documents are appropriate when a project consists of a series of actions and related to the issuance of rules, regulations, or other planning criteria. Program level EIRs facilitate streamlining of subsequent project level environmental review so that future development projects are allowed to tier from the program level EIR. Since the project site is within the general plan area and conditions at the site are similar to what was described in the general plan EIR and the projects within the scope of the adopted general plan, it was determined that preparation of an addendum to the general plan EIR was appropriate. So the Yountville Commons addendum includes an analysis of environmental topics that were covered in the general plan EIR. As demonstrated on upcoming slides, the addendum finds the project would not result in new significant impacts beyond what those that were identified in the general plan EIR. The addendum also identifies measures that will be implemented to reduce project impacts per town regulations and general plan EIR requirements. So this table here shows general plan build-out development assumptions, remaining development potential after you consider the projects that have already been approved, and it also shows what is proposed by the current project. And so as you could see here, as Brendan had mentioned, the project proposes up to 150 units, also 3,000 square feet of retail and food-oriented space, and 8,000 square feet of civic/commercial space. So the there are about 18 environmental topics that were analyzed in the addendum as required by the CEQA guidelines. An analysis was not required for for agricultural resources or mineral resources, since the site does not contain farmland or any known mineral resources. So this table shows key environmental topics that were covered in the addendum. And so these specific topics, project-specific measures, which comply with the existing general plan programs and policies and the municipal code, were identified for these topics. While no programs or policies were identified in the general plan EIR to reduce the VMT, a VMT analysis was prepared, and it showed that VMT impacts would be less than significant as the project's VMT would be below applicable thresholds. As noted in the previous slide, with the implementation of these measures, the addendum found that the project would not result in any new significant impacts or increase the severity of impacts identified in the general plan EIR. So although this was not required under CEQA, there is a general plan policy that requires intersections to operate at a level service C, intersections within Yountville. And so a transportation study was prepared to complete this LOS analysis. And basically the level service analysis showed that all studied intersections would operate at a level service A, which meets the town's general plan policy standards for level of service. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Amber. So the recommendation before the ZDRB this evening, and I'm not going to read this whole thing, I'm like Chair Miller, is essentially to adopt a resolution recommending that the town council adopt the entitlements previously described. And so the next steps this evening are the ZDRB asking any clarifying questions they may have of staff, consultants, and then receiving public comment, and then the commission discussion, and then potential motion to make a recommendation to council. That concludes our presentation this evening, and we're happy to answer any questions you may.
Great, thank you. Does anyone have any compelling questions from the dais? No? No questions?
I have questions.
Oh, Michael.
It was mainly with the, from a zoning standpoint, so there's a new zoning classification called
C.
Commons.
I was just curious why create a new designation for this versus something like planned development?
So essentially just to the uniqueness of this project and providing the council flexibility in the future. So that we put our heads together and decided that was the best way to go.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And then in terms of some of the zoning or the general plan changes is the height component of it. So you're changing from the language previous was consideration of limited three-story building elements to allowance of limited three-story building elements. But I guess the way the language reads is that at the end it says buildings in the commons land use designation may exceed these height and story limits. So I know the plan right now is 3 stories, and it's been very thoughtfully laid out to blend in, and the tallest building's in the middle, so there's a nice sort of height architecture to it. I was just curious what was meant by exceed these height and story limits. Was it just, I don't know if it meant beyond 3. I just wanted to know what we were setting ourselves up for.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So the potential heights that are going to be up for discussion when that day comes are between 40 and 50 feet.
Okay, but high. But that's 3. That's about 3 stories.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, got it. It was just that it said because in the section it says 3-story building elements. It's just the phrasing doesn't really, at least as I saw it, clarify that. Like it makes it seem like you could go up to 10 or something. Like I just wanted to make sure, and maybe I misread it. 3-story elements are discretionary, not a matter of right. Buildings in the commons land use designation may exceed these height and story limits. So I was just curious. Am I looking at the right document?
I think so.
Oh, okay. When you say exceed these height and story limits, does it mean
The,
3 stories?
yeah, 3 stories and the 35 feet.
Okay, got it. Okay. Okay. So on average, how high is a 3-story building?
I think it depends. Brian, do you have, what are your thoughts on that?
35. A 3-story building is usually 35, 40 feet.
Okay.
Typically, building codes measure to the halfway between the top of the peak and where the eave hits, which is around 35 feet. You think of it as 3 10-foot floor-to-floors.
Yeah.
And our code specifies that the height is measured to the peak. So we have to provide a little bit more flexibility because these buildings have a pitch.
Yeah. I guess what I'm saying is, does this phrasing make it where we could go to 5 stories? I mean, is that how it's designed to?
In theory, the way it's written.
Okay.
It's going to leave it to the council and what they decide is like the right size for the buildings.
Okay. I was just curious about the language. Okay. That was my only question.
So if we have questions about parking, is now the time to be, or is there another point in this meeting where we'll be talking about that?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Now's the time.
now's the
Now's
time.
the time.
All right, so I just had a couple of questions. It looks like the new proposed parking spaces, there will be 159 parking, which would also include some street parking as well. When I'm looking at the amendments on the code, it says that the parking for the commons is going to be per chapter 17.116. But when I read chapter 17.116, I don't see how this project is complying with what is written in that chapter. So that would be one question. I mean, does something new need to be written for the commons, since it doesn't appear that it would comply with what is under chapter 17.116? And then the other question I have is, of these 159 parking spaces that have been designated, what are planned, how many in planning's mind are going to be for workhouse, the housing, and how many are going to be dedicated in principle to the civic buildings? And I know that there is a thought that workforce housing is going to require fewer cars. However, in a town like Yountville, there's not a lot of services that people can rely on. So I just feel like we should anticipate that every unit there is going to have a car. And if that is the case, how is there a way to pivot with the parking and say, oh, actually, we're actually going to need more parking. And if we go ahead and build all these units, is there going to be a capability to pivot on parking because everything will already be built out? So that was about 10 questions. Sorry about that.
Yeah, can I pivot with a question on the same issue, on parking?
I think we should probably answer one at a time, and
Okay.
there were several questions there, so I'm not sure who we want to address that issue.
Yeah, I'll definitely start with the first one about
Okay.
the zoning code. So the new common zoning district was drafted with rules and regulations for the site, keeping in mind that who knows what's going to happen down the road. We may end up leasing a parcel here or, selling a parcel there. So we wanted to have rules and regulations in place that our code would apply to those in the future. But within the new common zoning district, there are exemptions for this town facilitated project. So that particular parking section wouldn't apply to the commons as long as it's moving forward as a town initiated project. The second part of your question, I think the parking is to be determined. This conceptual plan has been developed, over 2 years. I think, as Brendan mentioned earlier, they're thinking it's probably going to be closer to 120 units. But again, that's all, to be determined based on financing down the road later in 2026. And and again, the project is going to be phased over time as well. So that the parking lot that is on the north, side next to Schmidt Hall or in front of Schmidt Hall and Yountville Fifth, that would be phase 3. So depending on what happens, that parking is going to be available through phase 1 and phase 2, and what happens down the road is to be determined. See if Brad had anything you wanted to add, but did that cover it? Did you have more?
Is there somewhere, because you talk about the exemptions to planning, is there somewhere where that's spelled, like what the exemption is, or did I miss that?
Yeah, it's in there.
I was just going to add, while you look for that, I think the pivot point, as Aaron points out, is between phases 2 and 3. Because if you look at phase 2, currently, this is the project, not the entitlements. It's looking at 85 units in the Creekside Village. Mm-hmm. And there's 32 parking spaces that are in the Yount Street parking lot. So technically, after phase 2 is done, based on the numbers, and again, the concept, I think you have 85 units and you have roughly 190 parking spaces. So at that point, if everything's, to your assumption that everyone needs a parking spot and the parking lot's full, the council and the community has a decision point of, or do we build phase 3? Or do we just keep the front lot and because of parking, we're done? So I think that's, in my view, 2 years down the road, at least. So I think there's an opportunity for some of the strategies, mobility strategies that have been discussed, throughout the process to play out. Do these things actually work, or does everyone need a car? And I think that's a really interesting debate that's been going on for 2 years. And I think the pivot point, again, is between phases 2 and phase 3. There's no, and I was pretty clear in the last meeting that we are not looking to finance phase 3 right now. The goal is to build, to do the horizontal phase 1 with cash and to figure out how to finance through a bond phase 2. So the question of how to pay for phase 3, which will be a critical, community decision a few years down the road, gives you that pivot point I think you're looking at. And if you look at the numbers, again, 85 units. If you keep the 32 parking spaces in the front, I think you can add that to the, was it 159 or whatever the cumulative number is. So you can look at it that way, and I think that helps you with that question of when you can pivot.
Okay, thank you.
And just to follow up, the section that exempts the project is 1746050, the last sentence.
Okay.
Carol, you had a question?
Yeah, just to go on the record with respect to the parking, because I've visited with Aaron about it, and Brandon, that I think that the parking, as I understand it, currently it will net only 67 additional parking places, which in the current plan that might be insufficient depending upon what kind of retail businesses go in on those bottom floors, because they will create cars and traffic. And I know on Weber Street in particular, many of those homeowners, when they have guests on the weekend, there's no street parking. So I think, we as a zoning board are all very sensitive to, doing it right and keeping the ball moving forward without getting caught in the leaves and making, minute decisions on things that are maybe down the road. But the parking is something that needs to be addressed at some point in time.
Anyone else?
I'm just going to make a comment. I don't see a issue with the parking at all. I'm going to say that very clearly since I lived here. I don't think it's ever been an issue parking in restaurants. I think when you have people coming in town, it's such an approachable, walkable town, and that kind of trying to create a lot more parking space, I think, is important where it's really, really needed. But I think given how well this is completely laid out and the parking that's already there, not to mention what's going to come in advance, on top of the fact of this being built in 3 phases, if you will, as the town manager was just saying, it allows us to kind of work through phase 2 and for phase 3, whether you do less apartments, hopefully not, whether you do more parking, something may switch up a little bit, but as laid out, parking spaces as they are, I think it works beautifully, and I think it's more than sufficient for what this is really set up for. I don't think adding parking spaces here on this common area, if you will, is going to necessarily provide parking spaces for somebody to walk down to one of the local restaurants. I think you're either there or you're up here or you're in the middle, if you will. So I'm just not gathering the number of the parking spaces being, again, that much of an issue.
So bringing it back to, this is the question and answer for the team. I think we'll get into a discussion. We'll probably have many discussions about parking, but just want to bring it back to, are there any other questions of staff or the designers on the subject that's before us? No. All right. Excellent. Then I'm going to open public comment. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come up to the microphone, state your name, and ask a question or make a statement for 3 minutes?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Ruben Galvan. I'm a field representative with the NorCal Carpenters Union, Local 751, which covers Napa County. I'm here today to speak about the Yountville Commons project. Projects like this are essential not only for the growth of our community, but also for the hardworking men and women who will build it. That is why it's so important that strong labor standards are part of the foundation before we even break ground. I know it's a long way, but when I talk about strong labor standards, I mean fair wages, health insurance benefits, opportunities for local apprentices from state-accredited apprenticeship programs, and meaningful labor compliance that protects both workers and the community. The Yountville Commons project is subject to prevailing wage, and prevailing wage helps ensure fair pay. But prevailing wage alone does not guarantee that workers will have health insurance benefits, especially at a time when healthcare premiums continue to rise. Prevailing wage alone does not ensure that local apprentices will have the opportunity to gain on-the-job experience needed to build a lifelong career in the trades. And prevailing wage alone does not guarantee strong labor compliance, which is essential for safe working conditions, proper worker protections, and accountability on the job site. Without clear labor standards in place, we leave the door open for bad actors, contractors who cut corners, who offer no health insurance benefits, who deny opportunity for apprentices, who misclassify workers to avoid responsibilities, who operate unsafe job sites, and in the worst cases, commit wage theft. This is not the kind of development Yountville deserves. I want to be clear. I welcome progress. I support development that strengthens our community and provides opportunity. I support responsible development that lifts up workers, protects working families, and ensures that our community benefits from public investment. By adopting strong labor standards on the Yountville Commons project, you will ensure that this project is built the right way, by skilled workers, by trained apprentices, and by contractors who play by the rules. Thank you for your time and your commitment to strong labor standards.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. We'll now close the public comment portion of the meeting. And does anyone want to start a discussion? Now would be the appropriate time for us to kind of continue that discussion. Sorry. Anybody? Do you want to continue?
Yeah. Well, I'm open to hearing for sure about the parking thing. I just don't understand. Despite how many times we have heard other people too in town saying there's no parking, and I just have not experienced that. Driving, walking, I mean, nothing, whether it's in restaurants or anything. So I can't imagine it being that big of an impact given how this is laid out. So it doesn't seem to.
Yeah, it seems to me like, I know you said that there are lacking in services. It seems to me like the services that the majority of people that might reside here would be gig services, either rideshare or DoorDash, or a lot of the services that deliver groceries, that kind of thing. I was more concerned about what the designated area for those drop-offs and deliveries. I haven't heard much about that, but it seems like that addresses some of the concerns about parking that I have. I know a lot of young people that never really get in cars that aren't Waymos or Ubers.
Yeah, I mean, I just think, I mean, we don't know what the future's going to hold. Maybe people are going to be relying a lot more on Waymos and deliveries, but I think that I would prefer to assume that every household is going to need a car, just based on how life is currently in Yountville. And I, too, haven't experienced parking issues myself, but we're talking about adding potentially 150 units. It's probably going to be less, but if you just go with the, say, 120, and then also the parking that is going to be needed for the civic buildings, it just seems like it could be tight. But the fact that, I mean, you answered my question about the potential pivot. If we do find that parking is too tight, then there's a pivot point, and that can be addressed. Another thing is, if this is truly for workhouse, the workers in the town of Yountville, ideally they'll be able to walk to work. They'll probably still have a car, so that means their car will be sitting in the parking lot and not moving much. So there's not going to be as much circulation in the parking lot if the people who are living in these spaces are able to walk to work, which hopefully they can. But the fact there is a planned phasing and potential pivot point hopefully will address any issues that will arise.
Yeah, my concerns are not about current parking, but future parking, because as we all know, in the V Marketplace, that parking lot is used for public parking, and that area is privately owned, and the run along Washington Street has an overlay for retail, so it's highly likely that, 10, 15, 20, some point down the road, that parking area that services tourists and our resort population that we are highly dependent upon will lose that parking. And I think I want to be able to be, 95 years old and look in the rearview mirror and say, wow, we really forward thought about the parking, because I don't think anybody will say that there isn't lots of street parking on the weekend when we have a higher resort parking demand, that in years down the road we want to ensure that the parking that we provide in this project, because we will probably never see a project like this in my lifetime again, that we're very mindful of future needs. And I think the pivot point gives us that opportunity, between the two phases, and I'm very supportive of the plan the way it is with the pivot point.
Yeah, I'll draft off the parking and then move off to a different point. Yeah, I think that first of all, obviously congratulations on getting to this point. I mean, a lot of thought and time went into this project, and it is really elegant, and to be able to check so many boxes with a, potentially contentious moment in time for the town in terms of creating civic spaces, wanting to create more housing, state pressure. I wouldn't want to let any of these issues overlook the completeness of this effort, and I think it's really important that we acknowledge that. So we're working through some of these sort of trailing issues with the caveat that we're simply approving entitlement and zoning, and, a lot's going to happen, and very likely as plans start to emerge, and those changes ensue, we'll get back here and obviously discuss some of those finer points. And, on the case of parking, there's a lot of green space and a lot of civic land that sort of didn't have to be there. We could just put some houses and pave the whole thing over and problem solved. Obviously, there's a little bit of a give and take there, but I think if we approach the construction of this with the spirit of how it was planned, any hurdle that comes up will ultimately get resolved in the appropriate manner. I will say one thing about us at the ZDRB is I always try to say I'm not up here sharing my opinion. I'm really here to channel what I understand to be topics that are important to the town. And I wanted to go back to the question I brought up about the general plan, because I was around, as many people were, around the general plan and the language, and it really was slaved over every word, a lot of consideration. Changes to the general plan are, I think, a big deal, and they deserve more scrutiny, I think, than we got tonight. And I'm not hung up on height personally. In other words, if you can do it nicely and elegantly, it feels natural. The church right behind, that's quite tall. It makes sense. There's a church on the other side, it's quite tall. And those obviously were there before I think a lot of the stricter guidelines were in place. I would just say the way this is phrased right now, and I'll call attention to the general plan, there is a land use 2.5 maximum building height. It says, permit two-story buildings. All buildings shall adhere to the requirements for massing and policy land use 2.4, right? So it's that's section 2 and all the points. The language now says permit two-story buildings provided that additional stories may be allowed in accordance with policy LU 2.6. And then 2.6 already says, consideration of limited three-story building elements, and that was a big debate that ensued for the general plan of when would it happen, how it would happen, and this section was very carefully worded. I understand that this is evolving some of those elements, but the phrasing of buildings in the commons and land use designation may exceed these height and story limits and just sort of leave it at that feels like the type of open-ended statement that wasn't sort of in the spirit of how the general plan was created. I'm not saying it shouldn't and they can't go taller. I'm just saying this leaves it a lot open for interpretation. The plan was designed not to be overly open for interpretation. So that's why I'm hung up on that statement, is that I want to make sure the project does what it needs to do, but that the plan is updated in a way that's in accordance with the project versus leaving it at that.
Sure, and if it's consensus of the ZDRB, we can make a recommendation to change that language. It's not an issue.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a good point. Anybody else?
Well, I wanted to clarify something that's perhaps changing the subject a little bit, something that you said, Aaron, about potentially down the road selling a parcel. I just want to verify my understanding that Yountville has met their housing element requirements through 2031, correct?
No, we have not.
Okay. So if we were to sell a parcel of this project down the road, is that going to open builders' remedies possibilities up to developers?
So, interesting question. So, essentially, when the housing element was deemed compliant by the state of California, there are two programs in there related to the Housing Opportunity Site 1, which is French Laundry Gardens, and Housing Opportunity Site 2, which is the Catholic school site. And essentially what those programs say is that unless we've received owner interest or the lots have become for sale, that the town is obligated to find an alternative site by January 2026 and rezone that site by July 2026. Otherwise, the state could then come in and determine that our housing element is not in substantial compliance with state law, and at that point is when the builder's remedy would kick in.
Okay.
So if for some reason the general plan amendments and rezoning of this particular site didn't go through, we would have to find another one.
Okay. But if we, like say, go through phase 2 of this project, we will be compliant. Is that correct?
If so based on the numbers, I think we will be, yes.
Okay. All right. And so what would be the reason for selling a parcel?
Financing, just who knows. And I think it's more than selling, it's just the leasing. So, let's say a commercial space becomes available and we enter into a long-term lease, and all of a sudden someone else is the operator of that site, and they come in and, oh, we want to build this and we want to do this. Well, now we have a set of rules and regulations in place to guide that.
Okay. All right. Well,
I'll just maybe a comment on that before you change the subject. I think that, again, I'll start, actually everything I'm going to say is positive, but I really want to stress how, I think when states and sort of large government bodies put these policies in place, they end up well-intentioned, but create new complexities and loopholes. And I think that without being a deep student of every policy and what the state was trying to do, I think the fact that this town could produce this type of property that integrates with the town, that also creates the type of density, I think, I might be projecting, but I'm hoping the state comes around and says, this is kind of what we hope. So all those other towns that either didn't meet the element or at war with the policy can maybe look at what's happening here as a way to kind of find that middle ground. That's why I ultimately think this project, I think, is so exemplary for that reason. Because based on what I saw, that this doesn't just meet, but it exceeds the zoning required for the housing element. And I've made this comment, I'll say it on the record, is that we actually want to be celebrated and have a lot of runway for that sort of thing, as opposed to having the bar reset because we did so well. So if you do an A+, then all of a sudden your next A+ is like a C, and you're going to have to find new, that's not what we want. We want to be able to celebrate what's happening here. But I mean, to put this amount, this far exceeds the housing element requirement. I'm really hoping the state comes back with the appropriate, I would say, positive response versus turning sort of everything into, a problem moving forward. And by the way, the last point I was going to make, even if a parcel is sold, I mean, it's zoned for what it is, so the state is responding to zoning. Then if things are built, then they'll respond to the build.
Yeah, my hope is that this goes through and we meet the requirements, and then we're kind of out of the woods with the builder's remedy situation should something be sold and a developer come in. But I would say this is an A+++, to borrow a phrase from someone else recently. But and also just wanted to applaud the number of trees that are in the project and the green space. And I mean, I know everything else isn't modeled out, but everything around it looks like the moon compared to this project, so it looks great.
Yeah. It's funny, the whole mandate for housing is an issue that is pretty isolated, and it kind of creates other crises. There's transportation, there's economic, there's environmental, and of course parking crises that come from building and increasing the number of living units. And it strikes me that the urgency around transportation and about ecology and taking care of the resources is not as urgent a issue as where we put our cars, and it feels a little bit out of whack to me. So just saying that on the record. All right. What do we, the next thing is allowing staff to respond to any of the
Yeah.
issues that have been raised.
Thank you. I would just say before we move on, it did seem like there may be consensus on modifying the language in General Plan Policy LU 2.6.
And I would keep it really simple, just because I think to create too much, to me, it would just be something like buildings in the common land use designation may exceed these height and story limits, provided they fit the design standards and specifications as outlined in the project. I mean, to me, it's just about tying it together and making it cohesive.
I would maybe interject here that language about exceeding height limits would only necessarily apply to town-initiated projects, because otherwise all other applicants would need to comply with the 45, I believe it's a 45-foot height limit, correct? In
35.
35? Yep. In the zoning ordinance, that table that actually sets the general, the design standards, all other projects would be subject to that regardless of what this general plan says. Okay. It is like opening it up to exceed that for town-initiated projects. So I think we would try to steer away from using language in the general plan that specifies the town Yountville, the Commons project by name. Instead, maybe we would tie it to town-initiated projects or something like that. But that would be my recommendation, to avoid naming the project in the general plan.
Yeah, I think mainly because the name of the project and the land use is the same. So I think it's about making sure that we distinguish the Commons project from the Commons zoning and land use designation. I mean, it would just be. But I would say my comment was really more provided that the design adheres to the surrounding. I mean, that's general plan. It doesn't have to be specific to the Commons project. So it would just be stipulating that you would consider the design and the aesthetic of the surrounding projects,
if determined compatible with the surrounding
exactly.
area.
I think it's important that we make sure that, and the reason is, we may not all be here one day, and I think it's important that whoever is continuing this work forward, the language and the intent of it is there. So to me, it's not changing it. It's really just clarifying why it would need to do so and what does it mean to be successful in doing so. That's all. So it's just, so it would be along the buildings in the common land designation may exceed these height and story limits, within the associated or surrounding design standards,
Proximity,
right?
yeah.
Proximity. And that was the whole point of this section, was do it tastefully, right? And we just want to make sure that carries forward. That's all.
Got it.
Does anyone have any further questions for the staff or applicant? No? I guess we're at the point where we could discuss further, or we can make a motion. I'd be happy to make a motion myself. I'm going to give it a go. I move to adopt a resolution recommending that the town, 1, repeal and replace Section 1708.010 and add Chapter 1746.
Chair Miller, you don't have to read it all if you.
I don't.
No. You
Okay.
can say you recommend.
I'm going to recommend
what
that.
staff proposes with the general plan amendment as modified by.
Yes. What she said.
I second it.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. That motion carries, and we are recommending to the council to go ahead and do all those things. All right. Is there anything else that we need to cover? Let me just figure out where I am here. Administrative items?
There is one administrative item.
Okay.
It's next on the agenda.
I'll read that. It's approve request to cancel the Zoning and Design Review Board meeting scheduled for January 13th of 2026 due to a special town council meeting scheduled at 3 p.m. Are there any public comments that address that issue? No? Okay.
And there is possibly a rescheduled ZDRB meeting for the 15th TBD, right?
Yeah, I was going to hit that on the staff report, but yeah, we're due to the council meeting moving to our regularly scheduled date. We are looking to potentially have a special meeting later that week.
Okay. Okay. Is there a motion to approve the meeting cancellation?
I move to cancel meeting.
I'll second that.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Excellent. Board and staff reports.
Nothing else to add.
Okay. Motion to adjourn?
I move to adjourn.
I second.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Free to arrive at the sequence.